Hey guys, Jay here, and this is my F1 fantasy team for the F1 Singapore Grand Prix. Hi guys. So, for me going into Singapore, at the moment I'm minded to stick with my current team. I've got both the McLaren drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris had a great race in the end, in my opinion. Obviously, he had the yellow flag incident during qualifying, unfortunately. Would have qualified higher up, guaranteed. But nonetheless, despite having to start P15 in the end, climbed it all the way back to P4. Granted, I know partly due to the Carlos Sainz Checo Perez crash, but P4, and he got fastest lap, and he got my vote for driver of the day. I know Oscar got it in the end, but for me, he was my driver of the day. But I've that aside, fastest lap, extra 10 points, and climbed from 15th on the starting grid to fourth, and he was my turbo driver. There's just no way of getting rid of Lando right now. He's just the fastest man on track. Like I say, Oscar Piastri as well, who did get driver of the day, so an extra 10 points, and defended so brilliantly against Charles Leclerc. Even he was like a bit surprised when he took that move. He said it was kind of 50-50, and his value's just been building. Plus, if I remember correctly, during the race, they said Oscar Piastri has actually scored the most points out of any driver for the last 5 races. So if we were only 5 races into the season, he'd be actually leading the championship. So with that in mind, I am a bit torn on to use as my turbo driver, but I still think out the two, it's got to be Lando, just simply because of the driver of the day and the fastest laps. He 4 fastest laps, 7 driver of the days. I think if it wasn't for Piastri winning over the weekend, then maybe he would have got driver of the day as well. But I think that just sort of edges it out. Plus, obviously, he's fighting Max for the championship as well. So there's no way I'm getting rid of Lando, but we'll come back to Oscar in a second. Rest of my team, obviously, I've still got the two Williams drivers. Franco Colapinto, P8 finish, I think it was. Yeah, P8. I mean, you know, he's just been blowing everyone away, and his value's up 500,000 already within 2 races. And I'm hoping again he'll pull out all the stops in Singapore, along with Alexander Albon, who again he had a great race as well. I thought the Williams would be strong at Baku just because of the fast straights, and I'm hoping the same thing will happen in Singapore. But it was a great day for Williams, and they racked up some good points, and obviously we got Valtteri Bottas, who is my filler because it's either him or Zhou Guan Yu. But that said, he picked up a point. He got an overtake, so we got a point through Valtteri. Constructors, I've got Mercedes, which we'll come to in a second. Now, unfortunately for me or anyone that used Mercedes or Lewis Hamilton ended up taking a grid penalty and starting in the pit lane due to some new units. But on the positive side, George Russell promoted to P3 again because of the crash. So it wasn't, a total disaster. And in all, uh, George Russell himself even said that, they were pretty surprised at their pace, and, they don't want to get there. I guess they don't want to get ahead of themselves, shall we say, which is fair enough. And then we've got Ferrari again. The last few races, they've just been really quick, and they brought in 34 points. Unfortunately, if Carlos hadn't crashed, then it would have been more. I remember when I was watching the race, I was like, "Please, guys, easy, easy, easy." But the same when Piastri overtook Leclerc, I was a bit like, you know, come on, please keep it, please, keep it clean. That said, I think Ferrari will be strong in Singapore. Obviously, Carlos won last year. I'm not expecting him to win this year, but I do think Ferrari will be strong, along with the McLarens. So at the moment, I'm minded to stick with my team. The other reason is because it's my highest scoring this season, 234 points. I did take a 10-point penalty for an extra transfer, so it would have been 244. But all the same, and this will make sense when we get to the league standings, for me, this is a big boost. And I'm very worried about tinkering with the team going into Singapore. Again, it's another street circuit. It's another fast street circuit. Overtaking is hard, I think, in Singapore. But given the straight line speed of the McLarens, the Ferraris, and even the Williams to a degree, and the Mercedes, I think this will be okay. The only thing I would really like to bring in McLaren, the constructor. The problem I've got is the only way I can really do that. I want to bring them in for Mercedes, I should say. But the only way I can do that is if I also sacrifice Oscar Piastri, because otherwise I'm too short. I'm a couple of minutes short. So what I could do is go McLaren, but then the top driver I could bring in is George Russell. On one hand, I think this is a points gain, having McLaren as a constructor. On the other hand, I lose Oscar. George hasn't been the luckiest of drivers recently. Obviously, there was the DQ after Belgium, and from memory, I think something else happened recently, but he's not been the luckiest of drivers recently. The other thing with this is if I did go with this team, if for whatever reason McLaren have a DNF problem, that's going to hit me. So at least with keeping Oscar and Mercedes, if something was to go wrong with one team, I'm covered with another. I'm very 50-50 at the moment on this, so I'm not going to tinker with it right now. I'm thinking of waiting till practice and then deciding. At the moment, I am swaying more towards the McLaren George Russell, but I don't want to get ahead of myself either. So I'd love to know what you think. Would you stick with this team, or would you go with the McLaren George Russell setup? But like I say, for now, that is going to be my team. Can't really do anything with the back here. I did play around with like removing Albon to see if I could bring anyone in. Can't really do much, to be honest, at the back, so I'm leaving it as it is. On that though, what I will say is on F1 Fantasy Tracker, I did have a look, and so my budget's around 122 million. I've got the DNF percent off at the moment, and the only team out of these top four that kind of matches my team really is this one, but it's got Joe instead of Bottas, which I'm not comfortable with. Plus, all four of those teams scored less than me anyway, and even if I put on DNF, again, all four teams are lower scoring. And again, Joe is in one of the teams, actually along with Bottas. But, I mean, there's Piastri Leclerc, there's Piastri Hamilton, but then there's no way I could really get rid of Lando right now. And this is based on the last 5 races. If I go through the whole season, then it's a little better. With, again, so this is what I mean by Joe. So we've got Lando, Piastri, Joe, Colapinto, Albon, 205 points. But if we put on the DNF percentage, it drops, and then in comes Bottas for Albon, because Albon's had a few DNFs. So, yeah, I think for me, this is safe, and this is a possible points gain, possibly, but more risky. just in, yeah, I want to be covered in all angles if I can. But like I said, I'd love to know what you think. So that said, looking at the league standings, so as I mentioned in the last video for Azerbaijan, for me, the rest of the season is pure damage control. However, I'm happy to say another blue arrow, and I've gone up a good 15,000 places. So at the moment, I'm looking to break into the top 75,000. And if I do that, then I'll be looking to break into the top 50,000. So one step at a time at the moment. That said, I'm just under 1,000 points off the top. So again, long way to go. And like I say, pure damage control for me. Porsche F1 is top. I think they were top last time. They've got Leclerc, Norris, McLaren, Ferrari, and then Hulkenberg and Albon with Bottas. But the biggest scorers was actually Racing Infinity 3.0, 283 points. Both Piastri, Norris, and McLaren, along with Mercedes. And then they've got Albon, along with Ricciardo and Gasly. So out of the top 6, they were the highest scoring from when I checked a little while ago. So yeah, 283 points for Racing Infinity. So 234, 285. So I'm missing about 50 points really. But as I said during team selection, if I can find a way to bring in McLaren, that's what I'd like to do. But it does mean at the moment it would come at the cost of Piastri. I just don't know. I'm unsure what would be best. In terms of the Papaya Stealth League, Papaya Stealth Open. Whoops. Sorry, I went to the wrong thing. Whoops. Again, you can see here. So I came second in Azerbaijan, about 50 points behind Verstappen, 20 ahead of the Raven Racing. So I'm happy with that personally, because I've not been doing well in my own league. So I'm happy with that. But overall, I am still just a little off the pace, about say 150 points off the pace in my own league. And obviously we're coming towards the end of the season now anyway, so I'm going to try and like climb. Well, I'd like to try and get second at least in my own league. But yeah, that was the Papaya Stealth Open. Finally, guys, talking of coming towards the end of the season, Formula One have announced that testing for next season will take place in Bahrain on February the 26th, 27th, and 28th. So, not too surprising, to be fair. It's been in Bahrain for the last few years. So, be sure to put that in your calendar for testing before or during, possibly even, our 2025 team selection. So that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then please do give it a thumbs up. And if you want to follow my team, Papaya Stealth F1, for the rest of the season and beyond into 2025, then please do hit that subscribe button. Like I said, it's going to be quiet for a couple of weeks before we hit quota. So fantasy team wise, I'm probably looking at around in say 2 weeks time. Might do something around my F1 fantasy team. That said, as we do get towards the end of the F1 fantasy season, I am dipping my toes into Fantasy Women's Super League if you're here in the UK. And I don't know if it will be out now or next week, but I'm going to do a one-off video of my team for Women's Super League. Played it a little bit last season, but I didn't really take it seriously. This season, I'm dipping my toes in and try and learn it as best I can. But I'm just doing a one-off video to show you my team, either before this weekend, game week 1, or after game week 1 to see how they did. And it's just to have something else that maybe we can do a bit more of later on down the line, especially when we hit the winter break. But, you know, I want to make sure I get that balance right, because at the end of the day, the main focus of the channel is F1 fantasy and Formula 1 content. It's just I do also enjoy other sports. You get what I mean. But yeah, that said, thank you for any feedback in the last video. I appreciated it. And yeah, I'd love to know what you think, as I said earlier, about my team, whether to stick with this team or go for the George Russell McLaren team. And finally, what's left to say is enjoy the race Sunday, and it should be a good one. And I think if Lando gets a good qualifying, the championship, could be really on. Obviously, McLaren now top of the constructors, so fingers crossed that they'll keep that going. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you for watching, guys. All the best.
And this one's not over yet. We're heading into the wall at high speed. Sainz and Perez make a collision at high speed.
What the f*** is he did, man? What the f***? Is she crazy or what? Idiot.
They're side by side and they just sort of drift into each other. It's so needless.